Hello and welcome to the Actuary podcast, produced on behalf of the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries, the IFOA. I'm John Watkins, a financial journalist and your podcast host. And coming up in this episode, we've got Helena Morrissey, a well-known campaigner for diversity in financial professions. She's followed by Daniel Ramsey, an actuary with tech expertise and an interest in AI. And our last guest is Yoon Yu Quen, an actuary in external audit who is based out in Malaysia. So to start things off, we welcome to the studio diversity campaigner Helena Morrissey, who was recently interviewed in the Actuary's September-October issue. Helena, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure, John. Thanks for having me on.
It's certainly good to have you here. We've had a lord on our podcast before, but you're our first baroness.
The distinguishing factor.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a bit about what it's like being in the House of Lords as a woman, I guess? And, you know, we hear these things about an old boys club and that sort of stuff.
Well, it's true that 2/3 of the House are men and the average age is 72. So on one sense, that's true. And there are a lot of traditions and protocols. But someone once said to me, oh, it's a bit more like a boys' prep school because we have like pegs with our names on it, which is kind of funny. Archbishop of Canterbury, it says on the peg. But really, in all honesty, it actually is very diverse. I've just come from a debate, lots of different viewpoints, lots of ethnicities, different groups represented. I recently worked with 6 other baronesses, not sure what the collective noun is, but group of baronesses, on an amendment to the Employment Rights Bill to restrict the use of non-disclosure agreements for sexual harassment and other behaviours. And it was a wonderful cross-party collaboration. So actually, in real life, it's not quite the image that people have of it. I feel anyone can be welcome.
I assume it's getting better all the time, eh?
Exactly, yes. I mean, obviously, there might be some controversy sometimes that more women might be being appointed to adjust the numbers. And there's obviously the efforts by the present government to remove the hereditary peers that are all men because of the nature of those titles. But actually, as I say, it's I think there's a sense of anybody's view is welcome.
Okay. Diversity in the workplace is a big cause of yours after you experienced some issues of your own climbing the career ladder. How much has that changed over those decades? And while we've seen good progress in that area, much down to initiatives like the 30% Club, which you championed, what are the main barriers that women still face today?
So the barriers I faced, I started working in the prehistoric era, basically. I've lived nearly 40 years in the city. And it was then a very male dominated environment, but also very public school. I'd gone to state school. I wasn't privately educated. And in a way, that was as much a barrier as being a woman. I experienced a very overt, I suppose, discrimination on base of gender when I came back from my first maternity leave. And when I was passed over for promotion and I asked, what areas of my performance did I need to improve, and was told point blank it was because I'd had a baby. There was nothing wrong with my performance. That has changed. Obviously, that's illegal now. And I think culturally, although there's still some way to go, I mean, in those days, there was banter, as I put it, across the desk. People thought nothing of taking clients lap dancing clubs in the evening, that sort of thing. And obviously, that is now very much sort of behind us. But of course, there are subtle differences. And I think the biggest problem really for women in lots of ways, and I'm not glossing over the practical side of childcare and having babies and all of that, but often it is a bit chicken and egg and feeling quite isolated still. I was the only woman in a team of 16 when I started managing money. And someone contacted me the other day and said, please can I come and talk to you, Helena, because I'm the only woman in a team of 15. And I thought, oh, on that level, nothing's changed.
Yeah.
And it obviously, even if you're very robust as a person, and even if you're very ambitious or, can withstand a lot of sort of things happening to you, that just it just sort of grinds people down. And so, I'm on a mission really to get that critical mass.
Yeah, we have an interview with you in our September-October issue of the magazine, and in that you state that diversity drives have become somewhat politicized, and that they're in need of a reset. And I think that's it's a view that's growing. Can you tell us a bit about what you mean by that?
Mm. So, I mean, predominantly this has come from the US, where there'd been very obvious culture war, and we're seeing it escalate, I'm afraid, day by day, with certain views, so-called the woke views and political correctness and DEI being, held up as that political correctness rather than actually trying to create opportunity for all. And I have to say that, and I've said this to others, that I feel that some things that were done in the name of diversity, equity, and inclusion, unfortunately, excluded certain groups of the population. Certain, the majority white, middle-aged, middle-class man sometimes felt, I think, it wasn't for them, and that is an indictment on the movement, as it were. We should have been careful and make sure that everyone could see this was not a zero-sum game. This was not taking away opportunity. So that's why I think we need a reset. We need to move it away from this. We're actually only in favor of one type of person. To actually, what we're trying to do is shake up the thinking, improve results, make sure that anyone with talent has a great chance to succeed and support them in that. And that doesn't matter what your background is. And it doesn't mean that if you are a white, privately educated man, that you have any less opportunity than if you have the sort of opposite characteristics. And that's what we're trying to reclaim at the Diversity Project.
And that's quite a big challenge, presumably, because it's a big cultural issue and it goes against a lot of what has been happening in recent years. So what's the first stage of that? What's the first step of that?
So what we've been doing is, well, first of all, making sure that we do no harm. I mean, we've always made all our efforts very inclusive and tried to. Last year it was our International Men's Day event, but we had 80% men in the audience, and I thought, okay, that's the first diversity event I've ever attended where there's a majority of men, which is a telling statement. But also we've tried to take it right back to that. How do we get the best thinking and the cognitive diversity, different viewpoints? And that was what the genesis of the 30% Club was. Let's shake up boards, let's bring in new perspectives. But as I say, we'd somewhat lost sight of that, I think, in the general sense of what DEI stood for. So we last year commissioned some new research to look into the impact of cognitive diversity on the performance of investment teams, um, which obviously uh, is a complete different way of looking at it than saying, oh, we'll have one woman, one man, one this, one that, and lo and behold, we've got perfection. And we were saying, tell us what the data thinks, what data says, not what we think, and try to validate our viewpoint.
Okay. We mentioned the 30% Club a couple of times, which you championed, and which was all about, ensuring that we have a better balance on gender balance on UK company boards. Since then, you set up the Diversity Project. Tell us a bit about those two different projects.
So 30% Club, I mean, I'd run women's initiatives at the company where I was CEO. And to be honest, John, they were of mixed success. People came to events, said how inspiring, but didn't seem to inspire any change. So I was a bit disillusioned. Then we had the financial crisis, and I suddenly thought, wow, this is a moment to seize, because clearly, I mean, at that stage, 90% of UK directors were men, and often very similar backgrounds, very similar education. The average age was 62, et cetera, et cetera. Very little diversity in any dimension. So the thinking then was very much to let's shake up, let's have more challenge. Obviously, women isn't the only answer to that,
No.
but it would have different life experiences, different skill sets, sometimes different backgrounds. So, and then obviously the other thing was that it had often been women talking to women about women's issues. So I wanted to involve men more. Members of the 30% Club are men. And you used the word old boys club before. I chose the word club
Mm.
to deliberately try to encourage people who are clubbable and like that sort of way of operating the exclusivity. Um, and it did have an impact. We went from less than 10% women on FTSE 350 company boards to 43% today. But nothing really much changed in the financial services sector. And I was chair of the Investment Association, and people were saying, oh, you must do something, Helena, about the lack of diversity, particularly in investments. And eventually I thought, okay, time was come to do something. And with three other people, we founded the Diversity Project. But it wasn't about just women. This is about all dimensions of diversity. It was very much about saying, we really want a new generation of talent to join us in the industry, future-proof it, make sure our businesses are better and set up for the future, and that we have best outcomes for clients. That was 2016, so almost a decade ago. It's fair to say that it took a little while to get the commitment there, but we definitely have that commitment now. We have 120 member firms now, which is a record despite the backlash.
Yeah, and you mentioned the research that you've done under the Diversity Project into cognitive diversity, and you've also sort of revisited the business case for the Diversity Project. Can you just touch on that a little bit?
So, well, that really relates to this work that we've done. We do run. I must be clear. We've run educational programs. We've got something called the Pathway Program, which is around trying to develop more female fund managers. Still, only 12% of the total, for example.
Mm.
So we do a lot of different programs, but this was very much about restating the business case and trying to. There've always been cynics. There's always been skeptics. People told me right 15 years ago when I was at 30% Club, oh, women have never had it so good. I mean, there's always people who can't see the point of any of this. So what we've done is we've tried to say, okay, we hear you, but let's look again at this evidence and let's see actually, because we know everyone wants the best performance, they want the best talent.
Mm.
We've got to change the language. So we started with this research and then we've been rolling it out, including to fund managers who are often, I mentioned the proportion of women is very small, and it's quite difficult to get them to the table on some of these issues sometimes. And the response has been really incredible, actually. People have, it's sort of like, made them think slightly differently, I think, about diversity. And now the appetite is there to, for example, we discovered very few people know how to measure cognitive
Right.
diversity of their team.
Mhm.
So we're working with a provider who does a very sophisticated scorecard around helping someone assess what they've already got and then manage it better. So lots of interesting things have come out of it already, and I do feel we're on the journey to, as they say, to restating the business case.
Yeah, and this phrase, "women have never had it so good," sort of discounts how bad it might have been before, right?
Well, I mean, it's like, that, and it might probably have been true. We've been on a progress over many
Right.
centuries around the role of women and role of people born into,
Yeah.
less privileged status, etc. But that
That's
doesn't mean
relative.
we stop and then say enough already.
Right.
So yes.
Absolutely. And okay, I'll put you on the spot. Do you think that true diversity of all kinds and with genuine meaning behind it is achievable? And how long might that take us together?
So, I have to answer yes to the first question, otherwise I wouldn't be putting all this effort in. However, just to be clear, I have seen, I mentioned the statistics behind the 30% Club, but also, I understand that great change does not come in a straight line. You never, and whatever change you're talking about, if you look back over history of something that now is there, sure, we have technological change very rapidly, but sort of societal change takes decades or centuries sometimes to really happen. And we also have, I think it's a natural part of the change that you get people sort of pushing back and you get these waves.
Mm.
So I see what's happening starting from the States as part of that, that this is not a death knell. This is more like a challenge, throwing down the gauntlet, like,
Mhm.
let's make it better. Let's aspire to something higher and more inclusive. How long it might take, I used to, try to set deadlines. And actually, I still do in terms of, when we would expect say 20%
Mm.
female fund managers instead of 12. We break it down into that. I mean, I have a lot of children and I can see that they have grown up in much more sort of accepting and
Yes.
expecting diversity, whether it's at schools or whatever environment. So I think the impetus for the next, real big shift will come from the next generation who will demand a different sort of approach. So on that basis, what is a generation? 25 years? Let's set the outer limit at that.
Okay, that's fair. You've been described in the media as a superwoman, and but managing your very successful career with I think 9 children.
Yeah, children, yeah.
Do you like the term? And do you see, I guess you see yourself as a role model on this issue, though?
I don't like the term superwoman because I
Right.
think it does put people up on like a sense of a pedestal, and that the whole point is that, I mean, I am a very ordinary person from an ordinary background who's had good opportunities, but I've taken them. I think anyone can do that,
Mm.
and so on that basis, I don't like the term. I did come across a little drawing that one of my children had done many years ago, and it had me flying in the air with a cape on, and it had them all lined up with sort of, where's my tennis racket? Where's my dentist appointment? Where's my homework? And I thought, okay, they do get it. My children.
Yeah.
But so in that sense, I suppose I'm doing the juggling act. But I hope that it encourages people to think that they might do something similar or whatever version of life they have in mind. I don't think anyone sets themselves up as a role model. These days, I do get stopped in the street or on the tube a lot. And people, what is exciting for me is when people come up and they say, oh, Helena, thank you for what you do on, helping more women succeed and so forth. Because of you, I've
Mm.
just taken a, big decision to, change jobs, and I'm really happy with my new role. That is exciting. Or I've decided, yes, I can combine my family and a career, and
Mm.
this is what I want to do. And you've given me a little bit of hope and encouragement. I'm obviously just a nudge in that sense. They've made the decision themselves, but that is very lovely to hear.
Yeah, it's fulfilling, isn't it? We like to give our listeners a sense of you outside of your role as well. So we'll just finish with a question about your spare time and how you like to spend it. I mean, do you get much spare time, and what do you do with it when you do?
I do not get a lot of spare
Mhm.
time. It's mostly spent on sort of logistical arrangements for the family.
Yeah.
And I have a little dog, or we have a little dog, Buddy, who accompanies me on my Instagram posts. And, walking him, I do Pilates, very cliched, middle-aged woman kind of thing. That is my downtime and my totally like selfish moment, as it were. But it's a big part of sustaining my energy. So both of those things, getting some fresh air, sitting in the garden, being with my dog and my family.
Sounds nice. Well, brilliant. Helen, thank you so much for sharing your insights on diversity, which is such an important issue, and so topical right now, and for all of the things that you've achieved throughout your career. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much again.
Oh, thank you. It's been inspiring to meet you, Helena, and to find out more about your work and passions. And of course, do read the interview with Helena in the September-October issue or online at theactuary.com. Now, for our next guest, I'm joined remotely by actuary and tech expert Daniel Ramsey from Glasgow. Daniel, great to meet you. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to be here.
No, certainly good to have you. I want to start by talking a little bit about your role. You're a technology expert with a background in coding and data. So, how did you end up in actuarial work?
Well, so I well, technology expert is a bit of a generous term. So I was originally a software engineer. I used to actually work in the sports betting industry before I started building predictive models for football and horse racing.
Right.
And then I decided my life was far too easy and exciting, so I decided to sign up for the grueling process, which is the actuarial exams. So although I'm now officially an actuary, I never really stopped being a software developer. Really, there hasn't really been a week in my professional career as an actuary where I haven't been coding in Python or VBA or other languages. But yeah, so to answer your question, I went from being a software developer to more of an actuary who builds software for other actuaries, which suits me quite well as I like programming and I have much more fun building tools to automate work rather than actually doing the work.
Okay, so it's a meeting of those two worlds, which is really good. Your current role is in the research and development of actuarial technology at WTW. What does your day to day look like? And if you can tell us, what are you working on right now at this moment?
Well, WTW is the largest provider of actuarial software globally. We have five major products that we sell to clients, and as a result, we're always looking at different ways to make our products more powerful and easier to use. Um, my team are looking at applications of quantum computing and GPU acceleration for making calculations faster. These are just a few things we're working on. My work personally is actually focused a bit more on Gen AI the past year or two. So I've been kind of looking at a number of different use cases, like using AI for coding, for creating documentation, for helping with technology migrations, like converting like Excel models into coded models, that sort of thing.
That's fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. Can you tell us a bit more about the sort of roles that technology specialists play within the actuarial space? And do you think that with technology being quite a sort of behind the scenes piece of work, that technologists' work is getting the necessary regard and prominence?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily make a distinction between actuaries who are technologists and those aren't technologists. I feel like um, in this day and age, all actuaries have to be a technologist to some degree. I think, and maybe it may be sounding cliche or a truism, but I think that technology and especially AI will continue to become more and more integral to actuarial work. I think that there'll always be um, well, actually, I think there will be lower demand in the future for actuaries who only know Excel.
Mm.
But there'll be a higher demand for actuaries that, know their way around technology and have coding skills. So although we're going to be in a future where AI is likely going to be doing more and more of the coding, you'll still need actuaries who can actually read and understand code. So Yeah, so I don't really think of actuarial technology as being something behind the scenes. I would say all the exciting things happening now in the actuarial field are happening on the technology side. So if you really want to be on the frontier, you really have to be very much a technologist.
Yeah, and you mentioned your work around agentic AI there. You recently wrote a paper for the IFOA's Think Thought Leadership series about AI and insurers called the Agentic Model Office. Can you tell us a bit more about that? And I guess for some of our listeners, what AI agents really are?
So AI agents are it's becoming a bit of a nebulous term, and every tech company with a chatbot is calling it an agent these days. But the distinction I would make is between earlier chatbots and AI agents is really their ability to use tools to interact with their environment and plan for long horizon tasks. And people also throw in uh, having memory as another sort of key capability of these systems. Now, I think that after the initial excitement that people had over ChatGPT, I think that some people have been sort of underwhelmed rather, at the lack of utility of these systems in real life in terms of their work in the enterprise. So in this paper, I argue that the problem here is not actually with the AI itself. It's a problem with the infrastructure within organizations. So companies are usually this sort of tangled web of disparate legacy systems. It's very hard to navigate all these different systems as human. And AI, which struggle with graphical user interfaces, will naturally struggle much more than a human to navigate these systems. Hence, in the paper, I argue that if we make it easier for the AI to interact with the digital surface of an insurer, then it'll be much easier for AI agents to reach their full potential.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And look, you've talked about the growing roles of technology, AI, and data within the actuarial profession. Do you think that AI is something that all actuaries will have to increasingly embrace, understand as we move forward?
So I personally spend a lot of time working with AI, so I need to have quite a deep understanding of how these things work
Mm.
in order to make tools with them. But I wouldn't necessarily say that actuaries need to go into this topic as deeply as I have. The comparison I would make is with sort of computers and coding. You know, Actuaries use computers and they write a lot of code, but they don't need to have a deep understanding of how CPUs work or how the Python interpreter works. That's a little bit unnecessary. I think the best thing actuaries can do is just experiment with the tools. It should be less about the theoretical and just sort of getting hands on. Um, so if you're an actuary and if you're doing a task, if it's something you've done quite a lot, if it's quite a repetitive task, just take a step back and think, is this something where I could get AI to, get help me to do this faster, or so I don't have to do it again.
Yeah. And just finally, you co-founded the IFOA's Generative AI Working Party, and you're also on the International Actuarial Association's AI Task Force. What other areas are you researching at the moment, or what really excites you?
Well, our working party has been working on a series on the topic of agentic AI, and I think that's basically where Gen AI is going. I think everything will be agentic going forward. That's where all the sort of interesting use cases are. We recently published an article which sort of introduces the concept of agentic AI, makes it easy for sort of, it's a good introduction for actuaries. We've also done a piece on how actuarial modeling will be impacted by AI in the future, looking at how software has been impacted by these not by these actuarial, by these agentic uh, coding assistants and seeing how similar tools would impact actuaries. And also we wrote some pieces on how actuarial careers will be impacted, and we have another piece coming out in the next couple of weeks about regarding the sort of topics of like ethics and governance issues around using AI agents for actuarial work. Now, um, at the International Actuarial Association, within the AI task force, I have been working as part of the education and research work stream. So we've been discussing, how should actuarial educational curriculum change? How will actuarial careers be impacted by these tools going into the future? And it's my personal opinion that, AI agents will radically change a lot of careers, especially those in sort of highly skilled, uh, knowledge work kind of based professions, and actuaries will be no exception. I think that we're really at the start of a new industrial revolution on par with the computing revolution that we've seen in the past couple of decades. But, one saving grace is, this transformation isn't going to happen overnight. There's a lot of time for people to, upskill and react. I think that AI is continuing to surprise everyone with the new capabilities that these models are able to achieve and be able to do each passing month. And I think the most dangerous thing for people to do would be to ignore it. And the most beneficial thing would just be to embrace the technology.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, that's been a fantastic walk through what is a really interesting and exciting area of development and the impacts that that might have on the actuarial profession and actuaries all around the world. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts. Well, thanks for that, Daniel. And it's been great to learn more about how AI might impact the profession. Our last guest this time is Actuary Yoon Yu Quen, speaking to us remotely from Kuala Lumpur. Yoon, welcome. You're an actuary working for PwC in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Tell us a bit about your job. What does your day-to-day look like?
Hi, John. Thanks very much for this invitation from the Actuary magazine as well. Well, I head the PwC actuarial practice in Malaysia. We are quite a young practice, just set up about 4 years ago. Of course, being part of PwC, our work mostly revolves around audit and the sort of adjacent services such as due diligence, independent reviews, model validation work. We do get involved in some implementation work for certain clients for a variety of projects like IFRS 17, climate risk stress testing, but these are quite opportunistic. So audit is a core part of my work. It's not a common practice area for actuaries, but I do believe it's something that actuaries should consider at some stage of their careers. You actually get unparalleled access to end-to-end processes of valuation, financial reporting, and you get to learn pretty much about everything, every aspect of the business through the course of audits. So it's an excellent opportunity to build things like actuarial judgment, all the good stuff that we want to build and learn as actuaries. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you explain a little bit more for us about the internal and external audit, what the differences are in actuarial terms?
Yeah, so there's external and internal audit, as you mentioned. So we do quite a bit of external audit, but as well as internal audit sometimes in supporting clients. External audit, the focus is on whether the published financial statements actually represent the true and fair view of the business. So for an external auditor, we tend to look at the actual actuarial estimates itself and things like the methodology, the assumptions, and the results, all meaty and good stuff that actuaries like to get involved in, as the focus is on the numbers. Now, internal audit tends to be more focused on processes and controls. It's more in terms of the operational risk rather than the financial risk. And actuaries tend to be less comfortable in this unless you're on sort of like a SIRA, ERM sort of track. But this is certainly something that I think actuaries can really add value as well. So for internal audit, we look at the process and controls, whether they're properly designed and whether they're adhered to in practice.
And what's the market like in Malaysia for actuaries in general? What are the main trends that you're seeing there?
Well, the actual market in Malaysia is actually quite a lively one, and it's a growing community. It's a young community, and it's actually quite vibrant. I would say. For many decades, Malaysia has been an exporter of actuarial talent to the region and even internationally. In fact, previous IFOA presidents Kartina and even Sri Che were from Malaysia, for example. So we've made our stamps, internationally. I would say it's a function of economics and where markets elsewhere pay much more. But more critically, it's where the jobs have been. Regional and group actuarial functions tend not to be based out of Malaysia, But I do see this trend reversing, actually. Quite a few large multinationals have been rapidly growing their actual centers of excellence in Malaysia in the past couple of years. And it's not just about the number of roles, but the quality as well. So I found that beyond just doing BAU production and reporting work, it's moving up the value chain to stuff like modeling, experience analysis, and even pricing work. So hopefully this will deepen the talent pool in Malaysia and have better retention as well. I think it's quite key to ensure that these opportunities continue to expand for young actuaries in Malaysia. I mean, we have 13, last count, 13 universities that offer actuarial degrees in Malaysia. So the huge pipeline, a very healthy pipeline of actuarial talent going to the market every year. And the good thing is that we are seeing them move into non-actuarial roles. So within insurance, underwriting, claims management, finance, investments, and we're also starting to see them going to banking, and of course, the newest areas like data science. So it's heartening to hear that our new president Paul Sweeting, when he spoke in KL about our syllabus needing to be more responsive to change, I think it's excellent. So this will ensure that our young actuaries are always well placed to add value in our economy.
Yeah, the IFOA recently held its annual Asia conference in your city, and you not only attended but were also part of the organising committee. How did you go about planning it all, and how did it go?
Yeah, I'm really grateful for this excellent opportunity, and it's not. I volunteered not just for this year's IFOA Asia conference, but also the first one 2 years ago. So it's certainly something I wear with pride. For the rest of my career. So certainly very exciting to be able to meet members of the profession across the region, meeting friends old and new. This year, there was a really nice touch where the members of the organizing committee were invited on stage to receive a nice personalized glass plaque from the president. So that was really nice. Of course, I think all IFOA volunteers and those of you who volunteered before, you will know what I'm talking about. We receive a really nice lapel pin, and I do wear that now proudly for all the events for IFOA. And the turnout was excellent. I think we had about 400 plus. It's quite a good record turnout for an actuarial event in Malaysia.
Yeah, brilliant. And you're also vice president of the Actuarial Society of Malaysia, which I think has been going for 50 years or nearly 50 years now. What would you say its main purpose is? And are there any particular challenges?
Yeah, thanks. It's again also quite honored for me to be serving as the vice president. ASM, as you rightly mentioned, is approaching 50 years. I think in a couple of years' time, and it's not a young profession in Malaysia. So we've had actuaries throughout the years. ASM, we are quite ecumenical, and we have members from a whole range of actuarial professional bodies. So we have people who've gone through the SOA, the CAS, the Australian Institute, and of course, IFOA exam pathways as well. So purpose, I would say, it's always served as a place of community for actuaries in Malaysia, and it's done really well. We now have, I think, over 1,000 members, and we've got quite a full events calendar every year. So lots of CPD opportunities for everyone across the different practice areas as well. Um, and increasingly, we're a focal point for technical discussions. So for example, last year we set up a working group to work to discuss and get the actuarial views from the profession on the Malaysia risk-based capital requirements, which are being enhanced by the regulator. So the proceedings of these working groups uh, have been shared with the regulator, and we've had very good productive two-way dialogues on some of the technical bits. I would say, in terms of challenges, what remains work in progress for ASM and the profession in Malaysia in general is to be more in the forefront of matters of public interest in things like, aging society, healthcare cost challenges. Those are as valid in Malaysia as anywhere else. So I think as actuaries, we do need to step up and on that, I think it was great that Paul Sweeting mentioned at the IFO Asia conference that we should all get media training, and I fully agree with that. So I would consider this session of this podcast part of my training as well. So in communicating more effectively. So I think that's really an area that I think we should aim to excel in the future here in Malaysia.
Well, that's brilliant walk through the profession there in Malaysia and a little bit about your role as well. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, thank you so much, Yoon, and thank you to all our guests this episode. We hope, as always, that you've enjoyed listening, and do please remember to spread the word about our podcast. Also, please do join us again for our next episode coming out after the November-December issue of the magazine. We look forward to seeing you then.